The night shift at St. Bridget's Hospital held a strange kind of silence. Not quiet, machines beeped, wheels rolled, breath hitched, and nurses whispered, but a different kind of hush, the kind that curled into corners and draped itself over windows, waiting for something to happen. Clara Walsh moved through that hush like someone who knew how to hold it gently. She was in her scrubs, faded teal, with her dark hair pulled into a low twist at the nape of her neck. Her sneakers were quiet against the waxed floor, and the ID badge clipped to her chest bounced slightly as she walked the late-night rounds in the critical care unit. Most of the patients were stable, sleeping, or sedated. Except for room 407. She stopped just outside the door, glancing down at the clipboard, though she already knew his name by heart. Elias Thorne, age 36. Head trauma from a private plane accident, comatose upon arrival, no listed family, no visitors. There was more to him, there always was. Clara had heard the gossip circling the nurses' lounge. He was rich, like truly impossibly rich. Thorne Enterprises, tech ventures, investments, offshore accounts, a name whispered in boardrooms. But here he was just a man in a hospital gown, silent and still beneath crisp white sheets. Clara had cared for him for 6 days now. Something about his stillness unnerved her, not because she thought it was eerie, but because she sensed how hard the body was working beneath that silence. It was a fight, a quiet, stubborn fight to stay. She stepped in. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the monitors. Elia's face was bruised, but not harshly so anymore. His dark lashes cast shadows across high cheekbones. His lips were slightly parted. She had changed his bandages earlier, sat with him during her break, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the rise and fall of his chest. Tonight she reached for his hand again. It had become a habit. She told herself it was to check for circulation. But the truth was she had started to talk to him, just a little, a sentence here, a murmur there, as if somewhere deep inside he could hear her. Clara sat in the chair beside him and exhaled slowly. "Hey," she said softly, fingers brushing his knuckles. "Another long night." The monitors beeped their slow, steady rhythm. "I read your chart again, no family listed. That always feels heavy, doesn't it?" She paused. "It's okay. I know some people keep their worlds small on purpose." There was no answer, only the hum of machines. "I didn't mean to get attached," she said, eyes on his hand. "But I guess I did. Happens, I guess, with the quiet ones." She sat for a few more minutes, her thumb gently rubbing circles over the back of his hand. Then she stood, her break was almost over. Dawn wasn't far. Clara leaned over the way she always did, but this time something in her chest ached, something strange and full of feeling. She brushed her fingers gently over his hair, leaned close to his temple, and whispered, "You don't know me, Elias, and you'll probably forget me the second you wake up if you ever do, but I need to say it." She kissed his temple, light as a breath, then her voice lower now, closer to a confession. "You mattered to me, even if you never open your eyes. I just wanted you to know that." She pulled away, one last glance. Then she left. The door clicked softly behind her. But what she didn't know, what no one could have known, was that Elias Thorne had heard every word. His body was still trapped in a fog he couldn't climb out of, but his mind had caught fire the second her lips touched his skin. He couldn't move, couldn't open his eyes, couldn't reach for her. But he heard her. He felt her. And somewhere deep in the fractured places inside him, something began to shift. She didn't know she had changed everything. But she had. And nothing would be the same again. Morning came gently through the tall hospital windows, brushing pale gold across Elias Thorne's face. The blinds were half drawn, the world outside blurred with spring rain, but inside something had subtly shifted. Nurse Clara didn't know it yet. Her shift ended just after 7, and she handed off her notes to the day team. Her handwriting was neat, methodical, but the last line on Elias Thorne's chart carried a strange weight. Patient appears stable overnight, no significant changes, no response to stimuli. A lie, though she didn't know it. Elias had spent the hours since her whispered goodbye in a strange half-awareness. He couldn't open his eyes, couldn't force words past his throat, but her voice echoed through his mind like a song half-remembered. The warmth of her hand lingered. The kiss on his temple had splintered something inside him, not pain but presence. She had seen him, not his money, not his name, just him. It terrified him more than the crash. Dr. Rahul Menon was the neurologist assigned to Elias' case, and around 10 that morning, he walked into room 407, unaware that his patient was beginning to stir. "Morning, Mr. Thorne," he said casually, flipping through his chart, still hiding in there. He checked the pupils, reflexes, the usual litany of assessments. his brow furrowed at the subtle twitch in the left hand. Interesting, he muttered. When he pressed lightly against Ilya's shoulder, there was a flinch, small but real. Well, look at you, Dr. Menon whispered. He didn't call it a miracle yet, but he smiled for the first time in days. He made notes, ran tests, scheduled scans. Ilya's, adrift in his own mind, tried to push toward the surface. He didn't understand why he cared so deeply about the absence of one voice, why everything in him strained to hear it again. He didn't know her name, but he knew her kindness. Clara returned 3 nights later after a couple days off. She hadn't told anyone about what she'd said to Ilya's. It wasn't something you shared, a secret between a sleeping man and a woman who talked too much to ghosts. She paused outside room 407 like she always did, her stomach clenched. He looked the same, stillness woven into every part of him, but something felt different. The air was quieter, like it was listening. "Hey," she said softly, stepping inside. "Miss me?" Her voice quivered more than she expected. She checked the monitors, the IV lines, the healing wound along his hairline. Everything was charting normally, but when she reached for his hand this time, she nearly froze. His fingers moved just barely, a faint twitch against her skin. She pressed closer, heart thudding. "Elias," she whispered. No response. She waited a full minute, nothing. Shaking her head, she smiled sadly, wishful thinking. But she didn't let go of his hand. What she didn't know was that inside, Elias was screaming her name though he didn't know it, screaming to be seen, to tell her he'd heard her, that she mattered too. By the end of that week, the progress was undeniable. Elias opened his eyes. The first person he saw was Dr. Menon, whose relief was audible. "Welcome back, Mr. Thorne," he said with a quiet laugh. "You've been asleep long enough." Elias' throat was dry, his muscles weak, but his mind was focused with startling clarity. He nodded slowly, tried to speak. Nothing came out but a rasp. "We'll go slow, let your body catch up, but you're back." The billionaire didn't ask about his company, or lawyers, or stocks. He asked for the night nurse. Dr. Menon frowned slightly. "You'll meet everyone soon. Right now, let's get you reoriented." But Elias insisted, eyes sharp, stubborn. "The nurse," he whispered, voice raw, "the one who stayed." Clara wasn't told that Elias had woken up until the next shift. She was pouring coffee in the break room when a fellow nurse said, "Did you hear? Room 407 finally opened his eyes. Can you believe it?" Clara's heart jumped into her throat. He's awake. Yep, quiet type though, barely says anything. But alive, first thing he asked about was a nurse, said someone sat with him while he was under. Clara blinked. "What?" "Guess he dreamed about you," the nurse shrugged, sipping her tea. "Funny, huh?" But Clara wasn't laughing. She set her coffee down, hands shaking slightly. In room 407, Elias was staring out the window when she entered. Pale morning light hit the side of his face, the bruises mostly gone now, replaced by something deeper. He turned his head slowly, their eyes met for the first time. She froze. His voice was hoarse, barely above a breath. "You kissed me." Clara didn't speak. "You said I mattered." Still she said nothing, her cheeks burned, her throat closed. He smiled. "And I heard every words." Clara's first instinct was to leave the room. Her fingers curled tightly around the handle of her patient chart, and for a moment she genuinely forgot how to breathe. She wasn't prepared for this, his voice, steady despite the rasp, the clarity in his gaze, the truth sitting between them like a held breath. I didn't know you were awake," she said finally, her voice thin with shock. "I wasn't," Elias replied, lips tugging into a slow, uneven smile. "But I wasn't entirely gone either." Clara didn't move. The words she'd whispered that night returned with startling force. She'd let herself be vulnerable in the dark when no one could hear, not even him, or so she thought. But now he was looking at her like none of it had been imagined. She took a step closer, heart hammering. "I'm sorry if that made you uncomfortable." "You didn't," his reply was immediate. "It kept me here." Clara's eyes dropped to the floor. She didn't know what to do with the look he gave her, the gratitude that lived in it, or the way his voice softened when he spoke to her like she wasn't just another nurse in teal scrubs. "I didn't think anyone would sit with me," he said, "especially not someone who cared." She blinked. "I care about all my patients." "But you didn't kiss all your patients goodbye." That stopped her cold, her cheeks flushed, heat crawling up her neck. "I shouldn't have done that," she said. It wasn't professional, I just didn't think you'd ever. Wake up. She nodded. Elias looked down at his hands. I didn't think I would either, until you gave me a reason to. Silence settled again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Not exactly. It was tender, filled with something unspoken, like a sheet slowly being pulled back from a memory. Clara moved to check his IV line, trying to steady herself with routine, but her hands trembled slightly. You're healing well, she murmured, watching the clear fluid drip into the tubing. Do you remember what happened? Elias was quiet, then pieces the crash, lights, pain, and then your voice. She froze again but didn't turn around. You shouldn't remember that. Why? Clara swallowed, because that was meant for someone who wouldn't wake up. I didn't mean for it to be carried forward. But it was. She finally turned to look at him. I don't know who you are outside this room, she said softly. I know your name, your injury, that you came in alone, that no one called, no one visited. Elias held her gaze. That's because I made my life too big and too loud to make room for anything real. Clara looked down at his chart. You should rest. I've done nothing but rest for weeks. His voice had a spark now, tired but insistent. And I'm afraid if I fall asleep again, I'll wake up and none of this will be real. You'll be gone, or you'll pretend like it didn't matter. Her eyes lifted slowly. It did matter, I just don't know what to do with that now. Ilya's hand twitched against the blanket. Maybe just sit with me like before. So she did. She pulled the chair close to the side of his bed and sat quietly, hands in her lap. The room felt warmer, more alive. And different from the silence they had once shared, this time there was an electricity to it. Not the kind that jolted, it hummed gently, like something slow burning. She didn't know how long she stayed there. Minutes, an hour maybe, but he fell asleep again, this time not into unconsciousness, but something gentler. His breathing deepened, and she could see the tension in his jaw fade. Before she left, Clara looked at him one last time. Her hand hovered just above his, then retreated. Not this time. Word spread quickly that Elias Thorne had made a full recovery. But what most people didn't know, what even Clara hadn't fully grasped, was that the moment he regained his strength, he didn't go back to his penthouse, or to the executives who'd kept his company running, or to the press who wanted to know everything about the billionaire who'd almost died. Instead, he stayed at St. Bridget, longer than required, longer than medically necessary. He asked questions about the night staff, about Clara. He never said why. And Clara kept her distance, not because she didn't want to see him, but because something in her feared what he might represent now, someone from a world she didn't belong to, someone who had already seen too much of her heart. It was easier when he had been asleep. But one evening, a week after he was moved out of ICU, she found a folded note taped to the door of the staff break room. It wasn't signed, but she knew it was from him. You sat with me when I had nothing. If you still believe I mattered, even a little, meet me on the hospital roof, tonight, midnight. Her fingers trembled as she folded the paper. Her shift ended at 11. She could go home, pretend she never saw it. But her feet already knew the answer. The stairwell to the hospital roof was dim and worn, the kind of place no one really used except for smoke breaks or stolen silence. Clara climbed slowly, one hand grazing the railing, the other holding the folded note again and again like it might disappear if she let go. It was 5 minutes past midnight. The roof was quieter than she expected. Wind tugged gently at her jacket, the hum of the city below softened by the height. The sky was open, stars blurred behind a thin veil of clouds. And there, standing near the edge in a borrowed hospital coat, was Elias Thorne. He turned when he heard the door. She stepped out slowly, hesitant. You're not supposed to be up here. I bribed an orderly with free stock tips, he said, and for the first time she heard his laugh, quiet, warm, genuine. Not sure if he believed me. Clara managed a smile, but it was cautious. You came, he said. I wasn't sure I should. Neither was I, he admitted, but I couldn't leave things the way they were. She crossed her arms against the chill. You're healing, you should be thinking about going home. He looked out at the city. That's the thing, I'm not sure where that is anymore. She blinked. You don't have a home, he shook his head. I have properties, spaces with expensive furniture and passwords on the doors, but nothing with breath in it, nothing like this place. Clara frowned. This place. He turned toward her. You, the way you sat beside me when you thought I'd never wake up, the things you said, you reminded me of something I didn't know I missed. She looked down, flustered. I'm not some grand romantic, Elias added. I don't expect a movie ending or some fairy tale. When you kissed me, I felt human again, and I hadn't felt that in years. Clara's throat tightened. She didn't know how to respond to something so honest. Elias took a step closer. I'm not asking you for anything tonight, I just wanted to see you, awake, with the stars overhead instead of machines humming. I wanted to say thank you in a way that felt real. You already did. No, he shook his head. I've spent a long time watching people calculate their words around me. You didn't. Even when I couldn't respond, you gave me something no one else ever did. Clara's voice came softer than she expected. What? Grace. They stood in the quiet together, not needing to fill it. After a few minutes, Elias moved to the small bench near the side of the roof. He sat carefully, still adjusting to the weakness in his legs. Clara followed without thinking, sat beside him. I was going to leave the hospital tomorrow, he said after a while, but I delayed the discharge. She glanced at him. Why? I wanted one more night, one more chance. Clara tilted her head. For what? He looked straight ahead, to know if I'm just something you pitied, or if I was something more to you than a patient. There it was, the line she had danced around since the day he woke up. You weren't just a patient, she said quietly. You were a presence, something I didn't expect to miss as much as I did when I wasn't on shift, and that scared me. Why? Because you belong to a world that has nothing to do with mine. He looked at her, really looked. That's not true, I don't belong to that world. I made it because I thought it would protect me from being alone, but it didn't, it made me invisible. Clara met his eyes, and now. I'm starting over, he said simply, and I'd rather not do it alone. A long silence fell between them. The wind caught the hem of her jacket. Below, an ambulance wailed faintly through the city, reminding them both where they were. But for the first time in weeks, Clara didn't feel like she was standing between two lives. She reached out, took his hand. It was warm. Steady. I don't know what this is, she said, but I'd like to find out, without the monitors, without the machines, just as people. Ilya's smile was quiet, real. I'd like that too. And so they sat side by side, two lives that had crossed at the edge of loss, now drawn together by something quieter than fate. Something chosen. Neither of them spoke much after that. They didn't need to. Elias left the hospital 2 days later. No press, no motorcade, just a black sedan with the windows rolled down and an oversized hoodie pulled over his head. Clara didn't walk him out. She had morning rounds and a full list of patients. But as she moved through the halls that day, she kept catching herself glancing toward the elevator, half expecting to see him standing there again, still in borrowed socks, still watching her like she held the last page of a book he didn't want to close. She didn't hear from him for nearly 2 weeks. And life in its quiet way pressed forward, the shifts blurred, new admissions came, others went home. But every time Clara passed room 407, now empty, she felt a strange tug in her chest, not regret, something softer, a memory that hadn't faded yet. Until one Friday evening, she came home to find an envelope tucked under her apartment door. No return address, just her name handwritten in dark ink. Inside, a letter, short, neat, careful. Clara, I've spent most of my life building things, companies, numbers, legacies, but none of it ever felt like it meant anything until you told me I did. You gave me more than care. You gave me the feeling that maybe I was worth loving, even when I couldn't offer anything in return. I won't ask for more than you're willing to give, but I've opened a small community clinic in Rosebridge, 2 hours north. Nothing grand, just a few exam rooms and an old coffee machine that wheezes when it's happy. It's not a new empire, but it's something honest. I'll be here if you ever want to find out what life looks like where the noise ends. Yeah. Clara read it 3 times, then once more. She folded it slowly, set it on her kitchen table, and stared at it until the light outside turned orange. It took her 4 days to decide. Rosebridge was smaller than she expected, rolling hills, wide porches, and a general store with hand-painted signs. The clinic sat on the edge of town, brick and modest, with ivy climbing the back wall. She stood in front of it in her favorite coat, the wind playing with the loose strands of her hair, her heart stumbling over itself. The door was unlocked. She stepped inside. The waiting area smelled like cinnamon and hand sanitizer. 2 patients waited with paper cups of coffee. A child played with wooden blocks near the reception desk. It didn't look like a billionaire's legacy. It looked like something someone made with care. He stepped out from the back hallway at that exact moment, holding a clipboard, his expression distracted. Then he saw her. And everything paused. Ilias didn't say anything right away. He didn't need to. Clara took one step closer. I brought my stethoscope, she said, voice soft but steady, and my bad handwriting. He smiled slowly, like something in him had just let go of breath it had been holding too long. Then I guess we're ready. Spring turned to summer in Rosebridge. The clinic grew, but only just enough. Word spread quickly that the man who once ran empires now spent his mornings checking blood pressure and ordering sandwiches for the staff. That the night nurse from St. Bridget's now ran the front desk with quiet authority and a laugh that made even the grumpiest patient soften. They never rushed anything. They didn't call it love right away. But the first time Clara fell asleep on the couch in Elia's small apartment above the clinic, curled under a blanket after a long shift, he watched her for a moment before whispering a thank you to the room, to the moment, to her. He bent down, kissed her temple just as gently as she once had his, and murmured what had lived in him since the first night she said goodbye. You mattered long before I could say so. She stirred slightly in her sleep, a small smile ghosted her lips. He stayed beside her, awake now, and entirely, irrevocably home.